After the accident, I called the person who was supposed to help, but my son said, "Maybe tomorrow." That one sentence, short, unbothered, cruel in its ease, cracked something inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just the silent shift of something precious breaking. It had been a minor accident. A quick reflex, a sharp gasp, and the screech of tires as I swerved to avoid a dog that had bolted out from between two parked cars. The impact wasn't violent, but it was enough. My old sedan had crunched headfirst into a crooked light pole at the corner of Maple and Larch. The front bumper now sagged like a tired mouth, one headlight blinking slowly, then dying. The November air outside was crisp and smelled faintly of chimney smoke and damp leaves. It had rained the night before, and the pavement still carried the memory of it, dark patches slick with water, reflecting the orange-pink hues of the early sunset. A crow cawed somewhere in the distance, breaking the quiet like a snapped string. I had managed to get out of the car on my own. My knees trembled slightly, my hip ached, and I was favoring my right ankle, but nothing seemed broken. The shock came in waves, first cold, then numb, then hot, and I leaned against the car, my breath visible in the air, short and sharp. Groceries had scattered in the trunk, now open and slightly ajar. A carton of eggs had cracked. I saw yolks dripping down the side of the seat. A bundle of parsley lay crumpled near my shoe, already limp. Somewhere under the seat, an orange had rolled, its bright skin out of place in the fading gray light. I reached for my phone with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. My gloves were still in the passenger seat. My fingers were cold. I called my son. Not 911. Not roadside assistance. Not a neighbor. I called my boy. He picked up on the second ring, his voice clipped. "Yeah." I told him what happened. My voice didn't quiver, though my legs were starting to. I said the car was damaged but not totaled, that I had twisted something in my hip, but I was okay. I said I just needed someone to come, to take me home. That was all. A pause. A long one. The kind you don't want to hear. "Mom, I have an important report due today. I can't just drop everything. Maybe I'll come tomorrow." Tomorrow. He said it as if I had asked him to help me move furniture. As if I were an interruption in a schedule more important than my safety. "No, are you all right?" "No, where are you?" "I'll send someone. Just, maybe tomorrow." And in that moment, the cold didn't feel like weather, it felt like truth. "I understand," I whispered. The words tasted metallic in my mouth. Like pennies. Like blood. "I'll call you later," he said, and then the line went silent. Not even a soft goodbye. Around me, the world didn't flinch. A breeze rustled through the bare branches overhead. A car passed slowly, its headlights flickering across my face, then fading. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear long after the call had ended, as if holding it there might bring him back. But it didn't. So I just stood. I used to bring him soup when he was sick, sitting by his bed all night, changing cold cloths on his forehead. I once walked 3 miles in a snowstorm to bring him the math book he forgot for finals. He had cried into my coat when his first girlfriend left him, and I had stayed up making him pancakes at midnight just so he'd eat something. And now he couldn't drive 20 minutes. I sat down slowly on the curb, ignoring the twinge in my hip and the wetness soaking through my skirt. The air had turned colder, and the scent of damp earth and exhaust mixed into something sharp. I looked at the sidewalk in front of me, small cracks filled with brown pine needles, a discarded gum wrapper fluttering like it wanted to leave too. The car beside me hissed quietly as the engine cooled. I felt invisible, not like a ghost. Worse, like a fixture, a street lamp no one notices until it flickers and dies. He hadn't even said, "Hang tight." He hadn't said, "Let me know if you need anything." He had just said, "Tomorrow." And I had said, "I understand." But I didn't. I don't. A dull ache began to spread across my lower back. I shifted, trying to get comfortable, but there was no comfort. Only that empty feeling that crawls up the spine when you realize the one you love most has turned into someone who doesn't see you anymore. I looked up at the sky. The clouds were gathering, heavy and purple-gray, pulling the last of the daylight with them. Streetlights flickered on first one, then another, casting long, lonely shadows across the sidewalk. I remembered his voice at age 6, shrieking with joy when I surprised him at school on his birthday. I remembered the way he held my hand with both of his when we crossed the street. I remembered the Mother's Day card he made with crooked hearts and the words, "My mom is the best cook in the world." I remembered all the nights I stayed awake so he could sleep. And now he didn't have time. I glanced at my hands. They looked older than I remembered, faint veins, pale knuckles. I rubbed them together, trying to summon warmth. A chill was settling in. A group of teenagers on bikes passed by, one of them laughing loudly. None of them looked at me. I didn't blame them. I probably looked like someone waiting for a tow truck. But I was waiting for something much smaller and much more impossible. Love. Just a flicker of it. The kind you shouldn't have to ask for. Especially not from your child. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my fingers to go numb. Long enough for my breath to fog the air in little clouds. Long enough for the ache in my hip to sink deep into the bone. Then, in the distance, I heard it. A soft engine hum. Tires crunching over gravel. A church van, white with blue lettering. Slowing down. But that part's for later. Right now, I just want you to know the truth. The moment your child turns away from you isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a call that ends too quickly. A voice that says, maybe tomorrow. And the silence that follows, where everything you've ever done for them evaporates into thin air. I sat on that curb, holding the pieces of myself together with nothing but breath. And for the first time in my life, I knew I had been replaced. Not by a person, but by indifference. And that is the most unforgiving thing of all. I didn't cry. Not then. Not right away. I just sat on that curb, holding the phone in my lap, like if I touched it too quickly, it might burn me. His voice still echoed in my head. Maybe I'll come tomorrow. It wasn't just the words. It was how he said them. Like I was a chore. Like I was asking for too much. Like it was perfectly normal to tell your mother she could wait after a car accident while standing alone on the street. The air around me was cold, but not bitter. Still, it clung to my clothes and crept through the seams of my coat. The light had softened into a pale blue, the last hint of sun sinking behind the rows of modest houses across the street. Porch lights began to blink on, one by one, casting yellow halos onto driveways where children once played. Now it was quiet. I don't remember standing up or how long I sat there. All I remember was how my legs ached when I finally did. I gripped the edge of the car door for balance, the metal cold against my palm. A faint breeze slipped through my jacket. My knees wobbled. I leaned against the car again, not out of injury, but because the weight in my chest felt too heavy to carry. That weight had a name. Not sadness. Not pain. Resentment. It had been building quietly for years. Layer by layer. Missed calls. Short visits. Birthday cards signed with quick scribbles instead of the thoughtful notes he used to write in crayon. I never let myself admit how much it hurt. Until now. Now, I felt every bit of it. He could have come. He chose not to. And that choice told me everything. A long time ago, when he was 7, he scraped his knee in the backyard. I remember that summer day so clearly, the heat, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the way the lemonade pitcher sweated on the kitchen table. He came running to me, crying, blood on his leg, looking for comfort. I dropped everything, wiped his tears, cleaned the wound, kissed the top of his head, and told him he was brave. And now? Now I stood bleeding on the inside, and he didn't even ask how I felt. I stared at my cracked bumper, the broken groceries, the bent metal. A bag of frozen peas had burst, green dots scattered on the asphalt like tiny marbles. I could smell the milk from a broken container, leaking onto the pavement. A few celery stalks lay limp, bruised, forgotten. Then I stared at the phone again. My hands were shaking, but not from cold anymore. From what I couldn't say out loud. He left me there. I've never asked him for much. Not really. I helped with his tuition. Paid for part of his wedding. When his wife got pregnant and he was overwhelmed, I cleaned their apartment every Sunday for a year. Folded their laundry. Cooked extra portions of stew and dropped them off. I was happy to do it. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up. I kept thinking over and over, if it were him by the road, I wouldn't have hesitated. I wouldn't have said tomorrow. The streetlight overhead buzzed. The wind picked up a little. The trees swayed, their bare branches tapping lightly against one another like old bones. Cars passed. A couple walked their golden retriever on the other side of the street. Their conversation was light, almost cheerful. No one looked my way. And why would they? From the outside, I looked fine. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't waving. I was just still. But inside, my heart was screaming. A scream that had waited years to come out. I wasn't mad just because he didn't come. I was mad because deep down I knew this wasn't new. It had just never been this clear before. The signs were always there. Like the time he forgot my birthday. Not once, but twice. The first time, he said work had been hectic. The second time, he didn't mention it at all. I had made myself a small cake that year. Ate a slice alone while watching an old movie. I told myself it was fine. Or how he always cut phone calls short. I used to count how many minutes it would take before he said, "I have to run." 3, 5, sometimes 7. But never 10. Or how his wife, lovely in her own way, but always distant, never once invited me over for the holidays. And he never pushed her to. I remember one Christmas, he dropped by for 20 minutes, handed me a gift card, and said they had a dinner to get to. I'd spent 2 days preparing his favorite stuffing. He never even saw it. I told myself he was busy. Everyone's busy. But that's the thing about love, you make time when it matters. And today proved I didn't matter. Not enough. I stood there, arms crossed over my chest, trying to hold myself together. My shoulders trembled slightly, not from cold, but from restraint. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or collapse. Neither would have changed anything. The truth had already been spoken. Maybe I'll come tomorrow. I whispered it out loud, testing the words. They tasted like rust. A car drove by. A woman in the passenger seat glanced at me, then looked away. I wondered if I looked like someone waiting for a ride, or someone who had just lost something more important than a car. And I had, not a person, a belief. The belief that if you give enough, love will return. That if you sacrifice, if you show up, if you're steady and generous and kind, that eventually they will see you. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes, the more you give, the easier it is for people to forget you. Because you become background, useful, predictable, invisible. I thought about calling someone else. But who? Most of my friends had moved away or had families of their own. I didn't want to be a burden. I never wanted that. That's why I never told my son how lonely the house felt since his father died. Why I never mentioned the leaking roof or the fact that my knees hurt in the mornings. I always smiled when we spoke, kept it light, didn't push. And look where it got me. I blinked hard. My throat ached. I refused to cry on the side of the road. Not for a man who couldn't find 10 minutes for me. I shifted my weight. My hips stung. The bruise would be bad tomorrow. Tomorrow. That word again. He had no idea how much that one word would cost him. Not in money. In me. Because something in me cracked open, sitting on that curb. Something quiet but final. A door that had stayed open for decades gently began to close. Not with anger, but with clarity. That's what resentment really is, truth that's waited too long to speak. And now it had found its voice. I pulled my coat tighter, buttoning the last button with careful fingers. My breath fogged in the cold. The sky had turned a deeper shade of blue, almost black. One star blinked faintly above the rooftops. A faint scent of burning would drifted from a nearby chimney, mixing with the scent of spilled milk and broken produce. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. It reminded me of Sunday mornings years ago when I used to take my son to service. He used to hum the hymns in the car afterward. I'd buy him hot cocoa from the diner on 3rd Street. He always asked for whipped cream. He doesn't even remember. I let my hand fall to my side. My phone buzzed. For a second, hope surged. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he was on his way. But no. Spam call. I stared at the screen, then put the phone back in my purse. That was when I saw the van turning onto the street. White. Blue writing. Church volunteers. I didn't wave. I didn't move. But somehow they slowed. They noticed me. And that was more than I could say for my own son. But that part comes next. Right now, I just need you to understand something. Sometimes the pain isn't in being rejected. It's in knowing you never really mattered to the person you gave everything to. And once that truth settles in your chest, you never see them the same way again. You still love them, but you stop waiting. And that is the beginning of something different, something stronger, something called freedom. The van slowed as if it had been looking for me all along. White, with blue letters that read Grace Hill Outreach, its headlights caught the scuffed bumper of my car and the crumpled bags of groceries on the ground. A thin mist hung in the air, softening the glare of the streetlights. The night smelled faintly of cold asphalt and damp leaves. For a moment, I thought they might just pause and pass by. But then the driver's window rolled down. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The voice was warm, younger than I expected. A man in his 30s, maybe early 40s, with a soft Midwestern accent that reminded me of the old pastor from my childhood church back in Missouri. His eyes met mine, steady, concerned, without the slightest hint of judgment. I caught a glimpse of his hands on the steering wheel, steady, calloused, familiar. Not polished hands. Working hands. I wanted to lie. Say yes. Say I was fine and wave them on. Pride still clung to my spine. But my voice betrayed me. "No," I said, quieter than I intended. "No, I'm not." The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, gray hair tied back in a low bun, long coat fluttering in the breeze like a memory. She reminded me of my sister June, who passed away 6 winters ago. Kind hands. That's what I saw first. Kind, capable hands. "Let's get you out of the cold," she said gently, reaching for my arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Her hand was warm. Steady. Her coat smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry soap, the kind my mother used to buy in bulk when I was a girl. As they helped me into the van, the scent of fresh bread hit me first, soft, yeasty, comforting. It reminded me of the church bake sales I used to help run, back when my son was still young and proud to tug at my sleeve and introduce me as his mom. Then came the smell of clean laundry and pine-scented floor cleaner. The heat wrapped around me like a quilt just pulled from the dryer. There were boxes stacked neatly along the side, each labeled for delivery, elderly aid, north route. I sank into the backbench seat, clutching my purse like it was the last piece of familiar ground. We were dropping off care packages a few streets over, the man said, sliding back into the driver's seat. "Saw you and thought, someone's not okay." I gave a nod, unsure how to explain the weight in my chest. The woman in the passenger seat turned slightly toward me. "My name's Clara. This is Daniel. Do you need to go to the hospital?" I shook my head quickly. "No, just home." Daniel adjusted the heater, then glanced at me in the mirror. "All right. You just let us know where." The van moved forward. Outside, the sky had turned fully dark, and Christmas lights began to twinkle on porches, red, green, white, each one a soft echo of years long past. Years where my house had lights too, where my son would beg to put the star on the tree, where the house smelled of cinnamon and pine. Now it was mostly quiet, dim. As the van rolled past a park, I saw a little girl chasing a dog, her pink coat flapping behind her like wings. It reminded me of a day long ago, when my son was no older than 6, and we had gone sledding together. He'd fallen face first into the snow and come up laughing, cheeks red, eyes bright, looking at me like I was the safest place in the world. And yet today, he couldn't even look at his phone and say, "I'll be there." The silence in the van wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The hum of the engine. The soft rustle of the boxes shifting as we turned corners. The low murmur of a hymn playing from the radio. A psalm I hadn't heard in years, "Come thou fount of every blessing." The notes curled softly through the air, wrapping around me like the scarf I had forgotten to wear. Clara offered me a thermos. "It's just tea. Chamomile." I accepted it with both hands. The warmth seeped into my fingers and settled in my chest. "You've had a long day," she added, not pushing. I nodded. "My son." I called him. After the accident. Clara waited. He said he was busy. He said, "Maybe tomorrow." My voice cracked on that word. Neither of them said, "I'm sorry," or rushed to fill the space. They let it be quiet, and that felt like grace. Then Clara spoke. "I used to wait for my daughter's calls. Every Saturday," she said. But then the weeks turned into months. She didn't sound angry, just tired. The kind of tired you only earn after loving someone who doesn't love you back the way you hoped. I looked down at my hands. The knuckles were dry, the veins more visible now than they used to be. When did my skin start to look like my mother's? "She was my whole world," Clara said softly. "Still is, in a way. But I stopped calling, because every ring that went to voicemail chipped away at something inside me." I met her eyes. That was the twist. I wasn't alone. There were others like me. Mothers who gave everything, who showed up, and still found themselves standing outside in the cold. Daniel glanced back at me again. The world forgets that women like you built everything, brick by brick, birthday by birthday. I felt my throat tighten. My eyes stung, but I blinked the tears away. "Do you want us to call someone else?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, there's no one." Clara nodded, like she understood that too well. Outside, snowflakes had started to drift down lazily, catching the van's headlights like bits of feather. We turned onto my street. The familiar outline of my house appeared, modest, two-story, porch light still on. The paint was peeling near the gutters. A cracked tile on the step still needed replacing. I used to wait for my son to notice, to offer help. He never did. Daniel parked quietly. Clara stepped out first and opened my door. I stepped out slowly. My hip throbbed, but I hid the wince. The air was sharper now. The kind that stings your cheeks, but clears your mind. "Can we carry anything inside?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just me." They didn't insist. They stood on the porch as I fished for my keys, hands trembling only slightly. The porch light buzzed faintly above us, casting a pale gold circle on the welcome mat I hadn't replaced in years. When the door opened, a soft warmth greeted me. The faint smell of lavender from a candle I'd forgotten to blow out. Familiar shadows. My chair. My coat rack. My quiet. I turned around. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely holding steady. Clara smiled gently. "You were seen tonight. Don't forget that." Daniel gave a small wave. "If you ever need anything, we do a route here every Wednesday." I nodded, and then they were gone. I closed the door and, for a long moment, stood in the silence. I should have felt empty, but instead I felt clear, like someone had taken my pain, shaken it loose, and let the pieces settle differently. I set my purse on the table and sat down slowly in the old armchair by the window. The upholstery was worn smooth in the places my fingers often rested. Outside, snow had begun to fall in earnest. Flakes danced in the light from the street lamp. The world looked softer, quieter, like it was offering me a new beginning. I looked at the phone on the table. No new messages. And then I realized something that both surprised and steadied me. I didn't want him to call. Not anymore. Because kindness had come tonight. Not from blood, but from strangers who saw me, who helped without being asked, who didn't say tomorrow. And that meant something. That meant everything. Tomorrow, I would make a phone call. Not to my son, to my lawyer. But that's a different part of the story. For now, just know this. That night, I sat by the window, watched the first flakes of snow settle on the sidewalk, and let the quiet wrap around me. Not because I was forgotten, but because, for the first time in years, I had finally been remembered by someone. And that changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. The snow kept falling, silent and steady, blanketing the street in white. I sat by the window, wrapped in the same shawl I'd had since my husband passed. My knees ached and my tea had gone cold long ago. But I didn't move. Not because I was frozen in sadness. Because something had shifted. There was a quiet resolve settling into my bones, like the snow settling over the neighborhood rooftops. It wasn't anger. Not even pain. It was something colder. Clearer. Something final. The world outside was muted. Streetlights cast a soft yellow halo across the snow. I watched as the neighbor's tabby cat hopped carefully through a shallow drift, tail twitching with each step. Inside, The house was quiet, too quiet. No humming of the heater. No TV. Just the low creak of the floorboards under the weight of time. At 7 the next morning, I called Mr. Carver, my lawyer. He picked up on the third ring. "Good morning, Helen," he said, his voice still slightly groggy. "Is everything all right?" I took a deep breath and looked out the window. The snow had stopped, and the street was clean, untouched, like the world had been reset. "No, Jim. Everything's not all right," I said, my voice calm. "I want to make changes to my will. Today." There was a pause. "All right," he said, more alert now. "Coming after lunch?" 1 o'clock. "I'll be there." I hung up and moved to the bedroom. The cold had crept in overnight. I brushed my fingers over the floral curtains, faded from years of sun, but still soft. I got dressed slowly, folding each piece of clothing as if I were layering armor. I pulled on my coat, tugged my gloves on one finger at a time, and reached for my old black leather purse. It still smelled faintly of spearmint gum and lipstick. I'd taken that purse to every parent-teacher conference, every job interview after my husband passed, every hospital visit when my son broke his arm in middle school. The seams were beginning to fray, but it felt right somehow, like taking part of my past to rewrite the future. I took the bus into town. The metal bench at the stop was cold beneath me. A young woman stood nearby, scrolling on her phone, earbuds in. She didn't look up. Across the street, a bakery had just opened, steam fogged the windows, and the smell of cinnamon rolls drifted across the air. It reminded me of Saturday mornings from decades ago, when I'd wake up early to surprise my son with warm pastries before soccer practice. Snow had started to melt, and little rivers ran along the edges of the sidewalks. They twisted like tiny veins through the ice, alive and moving. People passed in coats and scarves, some carrying coffee, others with shopping bags, moving with that determined post-holiday pace. The city didn't know what had happened to me. It didn't need to. I arrived 5 minutes early. Mr. Carver was waiting with 2 cups of coffee, one just the way I liked it, 3 sugars, a splash of milk. The warmth seeped through the paper cup into my palms, grounding me. His office smelled of cedarwood and old paper. The window beside his desk looked out onto the courthouse lawn, where a fresh layer of snow had been disturbed only by bird tracks. I sat down and adjusted my scarf. I laid out everything clearly, calmly. I want everything to go to Grace Hill Outreach. The house, the accounts, all of it. They were there for me when my family wasn't. That matters. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He only nodded, his pen already in hand, and opened a folder. I signed the papers. It took less than an hour. When I stepped back outside, the sun was finally peeking through the clouds. A faint warmth on my face. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. I stopped by the market to buy a loaf of bread and some carrots. The cashier smiled, said something about the weather. I smiled back. That evening, I boiled potatoes and made a simple dinner. Buttered carrots, a piece of leftover chicken. The house smelled faintly of thyme and garlic. My appetite was small, but I made myself eat. My body deserved the same care I'd always given others. After I washed the dishes and wiped down the counter, I sat again in my armchair, the phone by my side. I knew it was coming. It rang at 6:42 p.m. My son's name lit up the screen. He sounded tired. "Hey, Mom. I just remembered you called yesterday. Sorry I couldn't come by. It was a really hectic day at work." I stayed quiet. "I meant to check on you today," he continued. But then Kara had that PDA thing and the boiler went out again. More silence. "Are you okay?" he finally asked. I could hear his keyboard clicking in the background. He was multitasking. "I was in an accident," I said simply. "I called you. You said maybe tomorrow." That shut him up. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I didn't realize, but strangers realized I interrupted. They saw me on the road. They stopped. They drove me home. They gave me tea." He was quiet again. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice still calm. "Tuition. Rent when you were broke. I helped you move 3 times. I helped you fix your credit. I paid off the dentist when you lost that job. I sat beside Kara when she had your baby and you were still on a plane. I watched your kids when you and Kara wanted weekends away. I kept showing up, even when you stopped noticing. I know, he said quietly. I know you did. But yesterday I needed you, I said. And you said maybe tomorrow. A long pause. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying I changed my will. Another pause. Longer. To what? He asked. To who? I corrected. To the people who showed up. Wait, what? You're leaving everything to some church group. Yes. You're kidding. You're seriously giving away my childhood home. There it was. The word, my. As if I hadn't scrubbed its floors for 40 years. As if I hadn't kept the heat on when my own coat had holes. As if he'd owned even a splinter of it. Yes, I said again. He started to speak, then stopped. The silence on the line was thick. I could hear his breathing. And the shift, the slow realization that I wasn't bluffing. I let the silence stretch. Then I said the last thing I needed to say. I'm not angry. I just finally learned what it means to stop waiting for someone to treat you like you matter. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. Instead, I got up, made a cup of peppermint tea, and stood by the window. The night had fallen softly. Lights flickered in houses across the street. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a dog bark, a child laugh. The faint scent of peppermint and lemon balm rose from my cup. I wasn't alone. I had chosen myself. And for once, that was enough. The following morning, I woke up before the sun. There was a strange calm in the house, the kind that fills empty chapels and hospital waiting rooms. A silence so whole, you begin to hear your own heart, your own breath, your own thoughts tapping at the edges of your mind like rain against glass. I didn't rush. There was no need to. I made myself oatmeal with a splash of milk and a sprinkle of brown sugar. I sat by the window with it, listening to the slow hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floor under the radiator's warmth. Then I checked the mailbox. Among the usual circulars and utility bills, there was a letter from Grace Hill Outreach. A handwritten note, addressed to me in gentle cursive. Inside was a thank you card. Nothing fancy. But the message inside made my hands tremble slightly. Dear Miss Harris, we were honored to meet you and glad we could offer comfort in your time of need. Your generosity humbles us beyond words. Please know, your kindness will live on in every meal delivered, every ride given, and every hand held. You are family now. With love and gratitude, Grace Hill Team, I held that card in my lap for a long time. Their words soaked into me slowly, like warm water on frostbitten skin. Then the phone buzzed. A text message. From my son. Mom, Kara says we should talk. This doesn't feel fair. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled to his name, and called. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, he said, cautiously. Hello, I replied. Calm. Steady. You got my message, he asked. I did. A pause. Kara's. She's worried. About the house. About what this means for the kids. Is she? I said, folding the corner of the thank you card absent-mindedly. Well, yes. I mean, we just didn't expect this. You didn't say anything before. I didn't know I needed to. You could have warned us. I mean, Mom, this affects us too. The word "us" echoed a little. You've made a lot of choices that affected me over the years, I said. But I never raised my voice. I never made you explain yourself. I supported your choices. That's different. How? You're my mother. You're supposed to be there. To help. That's what family does. That old heat rose in my chest. The same fire I used to swallow down with a smile and an offer to babysit. And when I needed help, I asked, who is there? A pause. I told you I'm sorry. I don't need an apology, I said. I needed you. Once. Just once. He sighed on the other end, a sound that felt more like frustration than regret. So you're really doing this? You're really giving it all away. I already did. Another pause. A sharp exhale. I just think you're overreacting. I nearly laughed. But instead, I let the silence answer him. Do you remember, I said quietly, when you lost your first job out of college? And I dipped into my retirement savings to cover your rent for 6 months. He didn't respond. Or when Kara was on bed rest during her second pregnancy and I moved in with you for 6 weeks to take care of the kids. Do you remember how I slept on a couch with a broken spring because all the bedrooms were taken? Still nothing. You never said thank you, I added. Not once. I didn't realize I had to, he muttered. No, I said. You didn't. That's the problem. He fell quiet again. Kara said she'd be willing to make space for you, he offered after a long pause. If things get harder as you age, if you ever need to move in, we'd find a way. I closed my eyes. Kara also said, she's your mother, not mine. Let her figure it out when you were deciding whether to come get me the day of the accident. There was a sharp intake of breath. You heard that? Yes. I didn't mean to, I know. The silence returned. Heavy. Tense. Then I said what I'd been waiting to say. I won't be a weight in anyone's life. Not anymore. His voice was quieter now. Smaller. So what now? Now I live my life. I bake bread. I water my plants. I send letters. I volunteer if I want. And when I pass, what I built will go to people who saw me when I was invisible to my own blood. I didn't mean to make you feel invisible, but you did. He didn't argue. Maybe he finally knew there was nothing left to say. I should go, I told him. The kettle's on. Mom, yes. Is this goodbye? I paused, then answered honestly. No, but it's the end of pretending. I hung up. The kettle did whistle right on time. I made my tea and stepped outside for a walk. The air was crisp. The snow on the ground had started to sparkle in the golden light of the late afternoon. I passed 2 kids building a snow fort and a man walking his dog. A sparrow landed on a mailbox, its tiny claws gripping the cold metal. No one looked at me twice, but I felt seen. I walked to Grace Hill Outreach, just to look at the building. Simple. Brick. A wooden ramp led to the door. A small bench outside was dusted with snow. Inside, I could see a volunteer packing paper bags with canned goods and fresh bread. I placed the thank you card in my coat pocket and smiled to myself. I may have been invisible to my own son, but I was not invisible here. I turned to walk home. As I reached my front steps, I realized I hadn't thought about what I'd lost in hours. Only what I had reclaimed. My time, my worth, my peace. And in that moment, I knew something with quiet certainty. I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. And age isn't weakness. It's dignity. And I finally claimed mine.